The morning sun rose over the busy streets of downtown Los Angeles. Cars honked their horns. People rushed to their offices with coffee cups in their hands. Nobody stopped to look at the old man sitting near the corner of 5th Street. His name was Marcus Williams, but nobody knew that anymore. To the world, he was just another homeless man wrapped in dirty blankets. Marcus had long gray hair that fell past his shoulders. His beard was thick and messy. His clothes were torn and stained from months of sleeping on the cold ground. His shoes had holes in them, and his fingers were rough and cracked from the harsh weather. When people walked past him, they looked the other way. Some crossed the street just to avoid him. Children pointed at him while their parents pulled them away quickly. But Marcus had not always lived like this. Once upon a time, he had been someone important. He had worn expensive suits and lived in a beautiful house with a garden full of roses. He had driven a nice car and eaten at fancy restaurants. Most importantly, he had played the piano. Not just any piano, but the grandest pianos in the most famous concert halls across America. His fingers had created music that made audiences cry with joy and stand up to clap for minutes without stopping. That was 20 years ago. Now, those memories felt like dreams from another lifetime. Marcus could barely remember the sound of applause or the feeling of spotlight on his face. All he knew now was hunger, cold nights, and the cruel words people threw at him as they passed by. Every morning, Marcus would wake up before the sun came up. He would fold his thin blanket carefully and put it inside his old shopping cart. That cart held everything he owned in the world. A few pieces of clothing, some empty water bottles, a torn photograph of a woman with kind eyes, and a small notebook filled with music notes that nobody could read anymore because the ink had faded over time. He would walk to the same spot every day, near a coffee shop where the smell of fresh bread made his empty stomach hurt. Sometimes, if he was lucky, one of the workers would come out and give him a cup of coffee or a sandwich from the day before. But most days, he just sat there, invisible to the world. People treated him badly. Young men in fancy clothes would laugh at him and call him names. They would take photos of him with their phones and post them on social media to make fun of him. Teenage girls would walk past him making faces and holding their noses as if he smelled worse than garbage. Office workers would shake their heads and mutter things like, "Get a job," or "You chose this life," without knowing anything about his story. One afternoon, a group of college students stopped near Marcus. They had been drinking and were looking for entertainment. One of them, a tall boy with a mean smile, walked up to Marcus and kicked his cup of coins across the sidewalk. The few pennies and nickels scattered everywhere, rolling into the gutter where Marcus could not reach them. The boy laughed loudly. His friends joined in, their cruel laughter echoing through the street. Marcus did not say anything. He just looked down at his empty hands and waited for them to leave. He had learned long ago that fighting back only made things worse. It was better to stay quiet and let the storm pass. But inside his heart, something was breaking. Every insult, every cruel joke, every cold stare chipped away at what was left of his spirit. He wondered if this was how his life would end, alone on the streets, forgotten by everyone, with nothing but painful memories of what he used to be. That night, as Marcus lay on the hard ground trying to sleep, he thought about his mother. She had been the one who first taught him to play the piano. He could still see her sitting beside him on the wooden bench in their small apartment, guiding his tiny fingers across the keys. She used to say that music was a gift from God, and that Marcus had been born with magic in his hands. His mother had worked 3 jobs to pay for his piano lessons. She had sacrificed everything so that her son could follow his dreams. When Marcus won his first piano competition at the age of 12, his mother had cried tears of happiness. She told him that he was going to change the world with his music. She believed in him when nobody else did. But his mother was gone now, taken by illness when Marcus was just 19 years old. She never got to see him perform at Carnegie Hall. She never got to see him become famous. And she never got to see him fall so far from everything she had dreamed for him. Tears rolled down Marcus's weathered face as he stared up at the stars. He whispered to the sky, asking his mother if she could still see him. He wondered if she was disappointed in what he had become. The thought hurt more than any hunger or cold ever could. The next morning came with gray clouds and the promise of rain. Marcus pulled his blanket tighter around his shoulders and watched the city wake up around him. People started their daily routines, walking past him like he was part of the furniture. Nobody stopped. Nobody cared. But something was different that day. A new sound filled the air. Somewhere down the street, music was playing. Not from a radio or a phone, but from a real instrument. Marcus lifted his head slowly, his ears catching the familiar melody of a song he had once known by heart. It was Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, one of the first pieces he had ever learned to play. The music pulled at something deep inside him. It was like a rope tied around his heart, dragging him toward a place he had tried so hard to forget. His feet started moving before his mind could stop them. He left his cart behind and followed the sound through the crowded streets, past shops and restaurants, until he reached a small plaza that he had never noticed before. And there, in the middle of the plaza, stood a beautiful black piano. It was a public piano, painted with colorful designs, and placed there for anyone to play. A young woman had just finished playing and was stepping away from the bench. The music had stopped, but its echo still hung in the air. Marcus stood frozen at the edge of the plaza, staring at the piano like it was a ghost from his past. His heart was beating so fast that he could feel it in his throat. His hands began to shake, not from cold, but from something much more powerful. It was fear, mixed with longing, pain mixed with hope. He had not touched a piano in almost 15 years. He was not sure if he still remembered how to play. He was not sure if his broken fingers could still create music. But as he looked at that piano shining in the morning light, something inside him started to wake up. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time. The question was simple but terrifying. Did he dare to walk up to that piano and try to play again? Did he dare to remember who he used to be? Or would he turn away and let his gift die with him on the cold streets of Los Angeles? Marcus stood at the edge of the plaza for what felt like hours. People walked around him, some bumping his shoulder without apologizing. They did not see him. They never did. But Marcus did not notice them either. His eyes were locked on the piano, sitting in the center of the plaza like a throne waiting for its king. His feet felt heavy, like they were made of stone. Every step toward that piano was a battle against the voice in his head telling him to run away. That voice reminded him of all the reasons he should not try. He was dirty. He smelled bad. His clothes were torn. People would laugh at him. They would take videos and mock him online. He would make a fool of himself. But there was another voice, softer and gentler, that sounded like his mother. This voice told him to be brave. It reminded him that music had once saved his life. It whispered that maybe, just maybe, it could save him again. Marcus took one step forward, then another. His heart was pounding so loud that he was sure everyone in the plaza could hear it. A young couple sitting on a bench nearby looked up from their phones and stared at him with disgust. He heard the woman whisper something to her boyfriend, probably something mean. But Marcus kept walking. When he finally reached the piano, he stopped and stared down at the keys. They were slightly yellowed from years of being outside, and some of them had chips and scratches. But to Marcus, they were the most beautiful things he had ever seen. He reached out with one trembling hand and touched a single key. The note rang out pure and clear, cutting through the noise of the city like a knife. That single note brought back a flood of memories. He remembered sitting at a grand piano on stage at Carnegie Hall, with thousands of people watching him. He remembered the feeling of the keys under his fingertips, smooth and cool. He remembered the rush of adrenaline as he played the first notes of a difficult piece, knowing that one mistake could ruin everything. He also remembered the night everything fell apart. It had happened 17 years ago. Marcus was at the height of his career. He was performing sold-out concerts around the world. Critics called him a genius. Magazines put his face on their covers. He had money, fame, and the respect of everyone in the music world. But he also had a secret that was slowly destroying him from the inside. The pressure of being perfect had become too much. Every concert felt like a test that he could fail at any moment. Every review felt like a judgment on his entire existence. He started drinking to calm his nerves before performances. At first, it was just 1 glass of wine. Then it became 2 glasses. Then, it became an entire bottle. The drinking helped for a while. It made the fear go away. It made him feel confident and powerful. But soon, he could not perform without it. He could not even wake up in the morning without reaching for a bottle. The alcohol became his master, and he became its slave. His wife, Elena, tried to help him. She begged him to get treatment. She cried and pleaded and threatened to leave. But Marcus was too proud to admit he had a problem. He told her she was overreacting. He told her that he was fine. He told her that he could quit any time he wanted, but he could not quit. And one night, after a terrible argument, Elena packed her bags and left. She took their daughter, Sophia, with her. Marcus never saw them again. He tried calling, but Elena had changed her number. He tried writing letters, but they came back unopened. The 2 people he loved most in the world had vanished from his life. After that, Marcus fell apart completely. He started missing concerts. He showed up drunk to rehearsals. He insulted critics and pushed away everyone who tried to help him. Within a year, his career was over. No one wanted to work with him. No one wanted to be associated with him. He became a joke in the music world, a cautionary tale that teachers told their students. The money ran out fast. Marcus had spent everything he had on alcohol and failed attempts to find his family. He sold his house, his car, his expensive clothes. He sold his watches and his jewelry. He even sold the piano that his mother had worked so hard to buy him. When there was nothing left to sell, he ended up on the streets. Now, standing in front of this public piano, Marcus felt all those memories crash over him like a wave. He wanted to run away. He wanted to hide. He wanted to disappear forever. But his fingers had already found their place on the keys. It was like his hands knew what to do, even when his brain did not. He pressed down on the first chord. The sound was rough and imperfect, but it was music. Real music. His fingers remembered the patterns even after all these years. They remembered the way to move across the keys, the pressure needed for each note, the timing that made a melody come alive. He started playing slowly, clumsily. His fingers hit wrong notes. His timing was off. People in the plaza started to stare, their faces filled with curiosity and confusion. Who was this dirty homeless man trying to play the piano? Why was he making such a fool of himself? A group of teenagers stopped nearby, holding up their phones to record him. They were laughing and making jokes. One of them said something about putting the video online with a funny caption. Marcus heard them, but he did not stop playing. He could not stop. The music was pulling him somewhere deep inside himself, to a place where their laughter could not reach. Slowly, something began to change. His fingers found their rhythm. The wrong notes became fewer. The melody became clearer. The music that had been sleeping inside him for 15 years was waking up, stretching its arms, and starting to breathe again. Marcus closed his eyes and let the music take over. He forgot about the people staring at him. He forgot about the teenagers with their phones. He forgot about the hunger in his stomach and the pain in his back. All that existed was the piano and the music flowing from his heart through his fingers to the keys. He played a piece by Chopin, a nocturne that he had performed hundreds of times in concert halls around the world. His fingers danced across the keys with growing confidence. The notes floated through the air like birds taking flight for the first time. The melody was sad and beautiful, full of longing and lost love. The teenagers stopped laughing. Their phones were still recording. But now, their faces showed something different. It was not mockery anymore. It was amazement. They could not believe what they were hearing. This homeless man, this person they had wanted to make fun of, was playing the piano like a professional. No, not like a professional. Like a master. More people started to gather around the plaza. They stopped walking and turned to listen. Some of them sat down on benches. Others stood at the edge of the crowd, their mouths open in surprise. A woman near the front had tears running down her cheeks. A little boy tugged at his father's hand and asked why the music made him feel so strange inside. Marcus played on, lost in a world of his own creation. For those few minutes, he was not a homeless man sleeping on the streets. He was not a failure, or a drunk, or a disgrace. He was who he had always been deep inside. He was a musician. He was an artist. He was a man with magic in his hands. When the last note faded into silence, Marcus opened his eyes. He blinked in the sunlight, confused for a moment about where he was. Then, he saw the crowd. There must have been 50 people surrounding the piano, maybe more. And they were all staring at him with wide eyes and open hearts. For a long moment, nobody moved. The silence was so thick that you could almost touch it. Marcus felt his heart pounding in his chest. He did not know what would happen next. Would they laugh? Would they walk away? Would they pretend that nothing special had just happened? Then, a single person started clapping. It was the woman with tears on her face. She clapped slowly at first, then faster. Another person joined her, then another, and another, until the entire plaza was filled with the thunder of applause. Marcus sat frozen on the piano bench, unable to believe what was happening. People were clapping for him. They were cheering for him. Some of them were even shouting words of praise. After years of being invisible, after years of being mocked and ignored, he was being seen again. He was being heard. And for the first time in 15 years, Marcus Williams allowed himself to smile. The applause continued for several minutes. Marcus did not know what to do with his hands. He had forgotten how to accept praise. He had forgotten what it felt like to have people look at him with admiration instead of disgust. His eyes burned with tears that he tried very hard to hold back. When the clapping finally stopped, something unexpected happened. People started walking toward him, not to push him away or tell him to leave, but to thank him. They shook his hand. They patted his shoulder. They told him that his music was the most beautiful thing they had ever heard. A young mother brought her little daughter to meet him, and the child placed a flower in his rough, calloused palm. Among the crowd was a young woman in her late 20s. Her name was Sarah Chen, and she worked as a journalist for a local news website. She had been walking to get lunch when she heard the music coming from the plaza. Like everyone else, she had stopped to listen. Unlike everyone else, she saw a story. Sarah pushed through the crowd and approached Marcus carefully. She could see that he was overwhelmed by all the attention. His hands were shaking, and his eyes darted around like a frightened animal looking for escape. She spoke softly, not wanting to scare him away. She introduced herself and asked if she could talk to him. Marcus looked at her with suspicion. People usually only wanted to talk to him when they wanted to make fun of him or chase him away. But something in Sarah's eyes seemed genuine. She did not look at him with pity or disgust. She looked at him with respect. Marcus nodded slowly. Sarah sat down on the edge of a nearby fountain and invited him to join her. The crowd was starting to break up now, people returning to their busy lives. But Sarah was in no hurry. She wanted to know this man's story, and she was willing to wait as long as it took. At first, Marcus did not say much. He answered her questions with short replies and long silences. He told her his name, but nothing else. He seemed to be struggling with something inside himself, like a man fighting against chains that only he could see. Sarah did not push. She told him about herself instead. She talked about how she had always loved music, but never learned to play an instrument. She talked about her grandfather, who had been a violinist in China before he immigrated to America. She talked about how music had the power to bring people together, to heal wounds, to make the impossible seem possible. Slowly, Marcus began to open up. The words came out one at a time, like drops of water from a leaky faucet. He told Sarah about his childhood in Detroit. He told her about his mother working 3 jobs to give him a chance at a better life. He told her about the first time he sat in front of a piano and felt like he had finally found where he belonged. Sarah listened without interrupting. She could see the pain behind every word. This was not just a story about a homeless man who could play the piano. This was a story about dreams that had been shattered and a life that had been broken into 1,000 pieces. When Marcus finished talking, the sun was starting to set behind the tall buildings of downtown Los Angeles. The plaza was almost empty now. Sarah closed her notebook and looked at Marcus with determination in her eyes. She told him that she wanted to write about him. She wanted to share his story with the world. Marcus shook his head immediately. He did not want attention. He did not want people to know what he had become. He was ashamed of his past and afraid of his future. The last thing he wanted was for strangers to read about his failures in some article on the internet. But Sarah did not give up easily. She explained that his story could inspire people. It could show them that no matter how far you fall, you can always get back up. It could give hope to others who were struggling with addiction, or homelessness or despair. His story could change lives. Marcus sat in silence for a long time. He thought about his mother and what she would want him to do. He thought about Elena and Sophia, wondering if they might see the article and know that he was still alive. He thought about all the people who had gathered around the piano to hear him play, and how their faces had lit up with joy. Finally, he agreed. But he had one condition. He did not want Sarah to write about him as a victim or a charity case. He wanted her to write about the music. He wanted the world to know that music never died, no matter how hard life tried to kill it, Sarah promised. They exchanged phone numbers, with Sarah giving Marcus a cheap prepaid phone so they could stay in touch. She gave him some money for food and told him to meet her at the plaza in 3 days. She had work to do. Over the next few days, Sarah threw herself into research. She found old articles about Marcus from when he was at the peak of his career. She found videos of his performances at famous concert halls. She found reviews that praised him as one of the greatest pianists of his generation. The contrast between who he was then and who he was now broke her heart. She also found stories about his fall from grace, articles about missed concerts and public scandals, reports of his wife leaving him and his career collapsing, photos of him looking drunk and lost, a shadow of the man he used to be. The media had not been kind to him during those dark years. When Sarah and Marcus met again, she showed him what she had found. Marcus looked at the old photos and videos with a strange expression on his face. It was like he was looking at a ghost, someone who had died a long time ago. He did not recognize the confident young man smiling from the concert stage. That person felt like a stranger. Sarah asked him if he was ready to share his story with the world. Marcus took a deep breath and nodded. He was tired of hiding. He was tired of being ashamed. Maybe it was time to face his past and see if there was anything left to save. 3 days later, Sarah published her article. It was titled, "The Street Pianist: A Story of Talent, Tragedy, and Hope." It included photos of Marcus, both old and new. It included quotes from people who had heard him play in the plaza. It included details about his life that Marcus had never shared with anyone before. The article was beautiful. Sarah had kept her promise. She had written about the music, about the magic in Marcus's hands that refused to die, no matter what life threw at him. She had written about resilience and redemption, about the human spirit's ability to survive even in the darkest circumstances. At first, nothing happened. The article sat on the website, getting a few dozen views from Sarah's friends and family. Marcus went back to his spot near the coffee shop, sleeping on the same hard ground, begging for the same spare change. He thought that nothing would change. He thought that the world had already forgotten about him, but the internet works in mysterious ways. Someone shared the article on social media, then someone else shared it, then a few more people. Within a week, the article had been viewed over 100,000 times. Within 2 weeks, it had gone viral. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know about the homeless pianist of Los Angeles. Television stations sent reporters to find him. Radio hosts talked about him during their morning shows. Celebrities shared the article on their social media accounts. Musicians around the world posted videos of themselves playing in tribute to Marcus Williams. The story had touched something deep in people's hearts. In a world full of bad news and conflict, here was a story about beauty, rising from ashes. Here was proof that talent could not be destroyed, that hope could survive in the most unlikely places. Marcus had become a symbol of something bigger than himself, and as the attention grew, so did the possibilities. Offers started coming in. Invitations to perform. Requests for interviews. Promises of help and support. The world that had ignored Marcus for so many years was suddenly paying attention. The question was, what would he do with this second chance? The flood of attention came so fast that Marcus did not know how to handle it. One day, he was invisible, sleeping behind a dumpster and searching for food in trash cans. The next day, people were stopping him on the street to take photos. Camera crews were setting up equipment in the plaza, waiting for him to appear. His face was everywhere, on television screens and computer monitors, and the phones of strangers who had never met him. It was overwhelming. Marcus had spent years trying to disappear, and now the whole world was looking at him. He felt exposed and vulnerable, like a wound that had been ripped open for everyone to see. Part of him wanted to run away and hide. Part of him wanted to go back to being invisible. But Sarah would not let him give up. She became his guide through this strange new world. She helped him respond to interview requests. She sorted through the offers that came pouring in, separating the genuine ones from the scams and the exploitation. She found him a safe place to sleep, a small room in a shelter where he could have some privacy and peace. The most important offer came from a man named David Foster. He was a wealthy businessman who owned several successful companies. More importantly, he was a huge lover of classical music. He had seen Sarah's article and been deeply moved by Marcus's story. He wanted to help in any way he could. David invited Marcus to meet him at his office in downtown Los Angeles. The building was tall and shiny, with glass walls and marble floors. Marcus felt completely out of place walking through the lobby in his worn-out clothes. Security guards looked at him with suspicion, until David's assistant came to escort him upstairs. David's office was on the top floor, with windows that looked out over the entire city. The furniture was expensive, and the walls were covered with paintings that probably cost more than Marcus had ever earned in his life. But David himself was surprisingly down to earth. He greeted Marcus with a warm handshake and offered him a seat on a comfortable leather couch. They talked for hours. David asked about Marcus's past, his career, his struggles with addiction. He did not judge or lecture. He simply listened with genuine interest and compassion. Marcus found himself opening up in ways he had not expected, sharing secrets he had kept buried for years. David explained that he wanted to give Marcus a real second chance, not just a temporary fix, but a complete fresh start. He offered to pay for Marcus to go to a rehabilitation center, the best one in the country, where he could finally deal with his addiction in a safe and supportive environment. He offered to buy Marcus new clothes and find him a proper apartment. He offered to help him rebuild his life from the ground up. But there was more. David also offered to sponsor Marcus's return to music. He would pay for a new piano, for practice space, for everything Marcus needed to get his skills back to where they had been before. And when Marcus was ready, David would arrange for him to perform again. A real concert, in a real venue, with paying audiences who wanted to hear him play. Marcus was stunned. He had not expected this level of generosity from a stranger. He asked David why he was willing to do so much for someone he had never met. David's answer was simple, but powerful. He said that when he was young, someone had given him a chance when no one else would. That chance had changed his life and made everything else possible. Now, he wanted to pay it forward. Marcus accepted the offer with tears in his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt something that he had almost forgotten existed. It was hope. Real, solid hope for a future that was better than his past. The rehabilitation center was located in a quiet town in Northern California, surrounded by forests and mountains. Marcus arrived there feeling scared and uncertain. He had tried to quit drinking many times before, but he had always failed. He did not know if this time would be any different. The first few days were the hardest. His body was used to alcohol, and without it, he felt sick and shaky. He could not sleep at night. His hands trembled so badly that he could not even hold a cup of water. The doctors and nurses took care of him around the clock, giving him medication to ease the withdrawal symptoms and checking on him every few hours. Slowly, the physical symptoms began to fade. But the emotional work was just beginning. Marcus started attending therapy sessions, both one-on-one and in groups with other people struggling with addiction. He learned about the root causes of his drinking, the pain and fear that had driven him to seek escape in a bottle. He talked about his mother for the first time in years. He cried as he remembered her sacrifices and how he had wasted everything she had worked so hard to give him. He talked about Elena and Sophia, the family he had lost because of his addiction. He allowed himself to feel the grief and regret that he had been numbing with alcohol for so long. The therapy was painful, but it was also healing. Marcus began to understand that addiction was not a moral failing or a sign of weakness. It was a disease that could be treated with the right help and support. He began to forgive himself for his past mistakes. Not because they did not matter, but because holding on to guilt was not helping him move forward. In the evenings, Marcus practiced piano. David had arranged for a beautiful upright piano to be placed in the center's common room. At first, Marcus's playing was rusty and uncertain. His fingers had lost their speed and precision. Notes that used to come easily now required intense concentration. But with each passing day, his skills began to return. Muscle memory kicked in, bringing back patterns and techniques that his conscious mind had forgotten. The other residents at the center would gather to listen as he played, finding comfort and inspiration in the music that filled the room. One evening, an elderly woman named Gloria sat down beside Marcus after he finished playing. She had tears on her wrinkled cheeks. She told him that his music reminded her of her late husband, who had been a trumpet player in a jazz band. She said that hearing Marcus play made her feel like her husband was still with her somehow, speaking to her through the notes. That conversation changed something in Marcus. He realized that his music was not just about him. It was not just about his career, or his reputation, or his personal satisfaction. Music had the power to touch other people's lives, to bring comfort and joy and healing. Every time he sat at the piano, he had the chance to give someone a gift that money could not buy. After 3 months at the rehabilitation center, Marcus was ready to leave. He had completed the program and learned tools to help him stay sober. He had gained weight and color in his cheeks. His eyes, which had been dull and empty for so long, now sparkled with life. David was there to pick him up on the day of his departure. He drove Marcus back to Los Angeles, where a new apartment was waiting for him. It was small but clean, with a bedroom, a bathroom, a tiny kitchen, and most importantly, a beautiful grand piano sitting in the living room. Marcus walked into the apartment and stood in front of the piano for a long time. He ran his fingers over the smooth black surface, feeling its solid presence beneath his touch. This was real. This was his. A home, a piano, a chance to start over. That night, Marcus sat at the piano and played until the sun came up. He played all the pieces he had loved as a young man. He played the nocturnes and sonatas that had made him famous. He played the simple melodies his mother had taught him when he was just a small boy learning to love music for the first time. And as he played, he made a promise to himself. He would not waste this second chance. He would honor the people who had believed in him, Sarah and David, and all the strangers who had shared his story and offered their support. He would make his mother proud. And maybe, just maybe, he would find a way to make things right with the family he had lost. The road ahead was still long and uncertain. There would be challenges and temptations. There would be moments when giving up seemed easier than going on. But Marcus was different now. He was stronger, he was wiser, and he had something he had been missing for 15 years. He had a reason to keep going. 6 months passed. Marcus practiced every day for 8 to 10 hours, rebuilding the skills that had once made him great. His fingers grew stronger and faster. The music flowed from him with increasing ease and beauty. He recorded some of his practice sessions and sent them to David, who shared them with contacts in the music industry. The response was encouraging. People who remembered Marcus from his glory days were amazed at how well he had recovered. Music critics who had written him off years ago were forced to admit that his talent had survived his troubles. Slowly, opportunities began to emerge. The first real test came in the form of a small concert at a community center in downtown Los Angeles. David had arranged it as a way for Marcus to get comfortable performing in front of an audience again. The venue was modest, holding only about 200 people, and the tickets were free. But for Marcus, it felt like the biggest performance of his life. The night before the concert, Marcus could not sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with fears and doubts. What if he had lost his touch? What if he made mistakes? What if the audience saw through him and realized that he was just a broken old man pretending to be a musician? He thought about drinking. The craving hit him suddenly and powerfully, like a wave crashing against a rock. He could almost taste the whiskey on his tongue, feel the warm numbness spreading through his body. Just one drink, the voice in his head whispered. Marcus got out of bed and walked to the piano. He sat down and placed his fingers on the keys. But he did not play. He just sat there, in the dark, fighting the battle inside his mind. He remembered what he had learned in rehabilitation. He remembered the tools he had been given to cope with moments like this. He picked up his phone and called Sarah. It was 2 a.m. She listened as Marcus told her about the craving, about the fear, about the voice telling him to give up. She did not judge or panic. She simply talked to him in her calm, steady voice until the storm inside him began to quiet. When the sun came up, Marcus was still sober. He had won another battle. He took a shower, ate a healthy breakfast, and spent the morning doing light practice and meditation. By the time evening arrived, he felt ready, not confident, exactly, but ready. The community center was packed. Every seat was taken, and people were standing along the walls. Sarah was there in the front row, beaming with pride. David sat beside her, looking almost as nervous as Marcus felt. In the back of the room, Marcus could see faces he recognized from his days on the streets. Some of the homeless people he had known had come to support him, wearing their cleanest clothes and sitting up straight in their chairs. Marcus walked onto the stage and sat down at the piano. The room fell silent. He looked out at the audience. All those faces, looking back at him with expectation and hope. His hands were shaking slightly as he placed them on the keys. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He thought about his mother, sitting in heaven and watching over him. He thought about all the people who had helped him get to this moment. He thought about the music itself, the notes and melodies that had been his companions through joy and sorrow, success and failure, loneliness and love. And then he began to play. The first notes were tentative, like a bird testing its wings after a long winter. But as the music built, Marcus found his confidence. His fingers moved, with growing certainty. The melody unfolded with beauty and emotion that made several people in the audience gasp out loud. He played for nearly an hour without stopping. He performed classics by Chopin, Liszt, and Debussy. He played some of his own compositions, pieces he had written during his years on the streets, never imagining that anyone would ever hear them. Each song told a part of his story, a chapter of his journey from darkness to light. When he finally lifted his hands from the keys, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then the room exploded with applause. People jumped to their feet, clapping and cheering and wiping tears from their eyes. The standing ovation lasted for 5 full minutes. Marcus stood and bowed, overwhelmed by the response. He had performed in famous concert halls around the world, but nothing compared to this. This was not applause for his technical skill or his reputation. This was applause for his courage, his survival, his refusal to let life defeat him. After the concert, dozens of people lined up to meet Marcus. They shook his hand, hugged him, thanked him for sharing his music and his story. An elderly man told Marcus that he had been thinking about ending his own life, but hearing the concert had given him a reason to keep going. A young woman with tears streaming down her face said that Marcus's story had inspired her to finally get help for her own addiction. One person in the line caught Marcus's attention. It was a woman in her early 40s with dark hair and familiar eyes. She stood at the back of the crowd, hesitating to approach. Marcus felt his heart stop when he recognized her. It was Elena, his ex-wife, the woman he had lost 15 years ago because of his drinking. Marcus excused himself from the line and walked toward her slowly, afraid that she might disappear if he moved too fast. Elena stood her ground, watching him approach with an expression that mixed sadness with something else. Something that might have been hope. They stood face to face for a long moment without speaking. So many words needed to be said, but neither of them knew where to begin. Finally, Marcus spoke. His voice cracked as he said her name, a name he had not spoken out loud in years. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She told him that she had seen the article Sarah had written. She had watched videos of him playing in the plaza. She had followed his story from afar, too afraid to reach out, too uncertain about what to say. But when she heard about the concert, she knew she had to come. Marcus wanted to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, to explain everything that had happened, but Elena stopped him. She said that the past was the past, and nothing could change it. What mattered now was who he had become. She had seen the concert. She had seen the man he was today, and she was proud of him. They talked for hours that night, sitting in the empty community center long after everyone else had gone home. They talked about the years they had spent apart. They talked about their daughter, Sophia, who was now a college student studying medicine. They talked about mistakes and regrets, healing and forgiveness. Elena told Marcus that she had never stopped loving him, even when she hated what he had become. Leaving him had been the hardest thing she had ever done. But she had to protect their daughter from the chaos of his addiction. She had always hoped that one day he would find his way back to himself. And now, against all odds, he had. Marcus asked about Sophia. Elena hesitated before answering. She explained that their daughter had complicated feelings about her father. Sophia had been 8 years old when Elena took her away. She had memories of Marcus playing piano for her at bedtime, of him carrying her on his shoulders through the park. But she also had memories of him drunk and angry, of fights and broken promises. Elena could not promise that Sophia would want to see Marcus. That would be their daughter's choice to make. But she promised to tell Sophia about the concert, about the man Marcus had become. Maybe, with time, they could rebuild their relationship. Maybe there was still hope for their family. When they finally said goodbye, Marcus felt a strange peace settling over him. He did not know what the future would bring. He did not know if Sophia would ever forgive him, or if he and Elena could truly repair what had been broken. But for the first time in 15 years, he had hope. Real hope. Not just wishes and dreams. He walked home alone through the quiet streets of Los Angeles. The city that had witnessed his worst moments was now seeing his best. The same sidewalks where he had begged for change were now carrying him toward a new life. The same stars that had watched him cry himself to sleep now seemed to shine brighter, as if they too were celebrating his victory. Marcus knew the journey was far from over, but he also knew that he was no longer walking alone. He had friends who believed in him. He had a gift that the world wanted to hear, and somewhere out there, he had a daughter who might one day want to know the father she had lost. For now, that was enough. For now, it was everything. The weeks following the community center concert were filled with change. News of Marcus's performance spread through social media and music blogs. Videos from that night were watched millions of times. People around the world shared the story of the homeless pianist who had risen from the ashes to play again. Major news outlets started calling for interviews. Television hosts wanted Marcus on their shows. Magazine editors wanted his face on their covers. The same media that had ignored him for 15 years now could not get enough of him. Marcus found it strange and slightly uncomfortable. But Sarah helped him navigate the attention with grace and dignity. More importantly, invitations to perform started arriving from prestigious venues. Symphony orchestras wanted him as a guest soloist. Music festivals offered him headline slots. Recording companies reached out with proposals for new albums. The music world was eager to welcome Marcus back into its embrace. But Marcus was in no hurry. He remembered all too well what had happened the last time he let success consume him. He turned down most of the offers, accepting only a few carefully selected performances that would allow him to rebuild his career at a pace he could handle. Quality over quantity, David advised him. Make each performance count. Meanwhile, Elena kept her promise. She told Sophia about the concert and shared videos of her father playing. At first, Sophia refused to watch. The wound of her father's abandonment was still raw, even after all these years. She had built walls around her heart to protect herself from the pain of missing him. But curiosity eventually won. Late one night, alone in her dorm room, Sophia clicked on one of the videos. She watched her father sit down at the piano and begin to play. She recognized the piece immediately. It was a lullaby he used to play for her when she was a little girl, a song she had not heard in 15 years but had never forgotten. The tears came without warning. Sophia sobbed quietly in the darkness, overwhelmed by memories she had tried so hard to bury. She remembered her father's hands moving across the keys, his voice humming along to the melody. She remembered falling asleep to that music, feeling safe and loved and certain that nothing bad could ever happen to her. She watched more videos. She read the articles about her father's journey. She saw the photos of him on the streets, dirty and broken, and the photos of him now, clean and hopeful. She began to understand that addiction was not a choice but a disease, and that her father had been fighting a battle she was too young to comprehend. After several sleepless nights, Sophia sent her mother a text message. She was ready to meet her father. Not ready to forgive him, not yet, but ready to see him face to face and hear his side of the story. Elena arranged the meeting at a quiet cafe in San Francisco, where Sophia was attending medical school. Marcus flew up from Los Angeles, his heart pounding with nervousness the entire flight. He changed his clothes 3 times before leaving his hotel, unable to decide what would make the best impression on the daughter he had not seen since she was 8 years old. Sophia was already at the cafe when he arrived. She sat at a corner table, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her face a beautiful mixture of her mother's features and his own. She looked up as he approached, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Marcus sat down across from her, his hands clasped together to hide their trembling. He wanted to reach out and hug her, to hold her the way he had when she was a child, but he knew he had not earned that right. He had to wait for her to decide how close she wanted him to be. They sat in awkward silence for several minutes. Sophia stirred her coffee without drinking it. Marcus stared at the table, searching for words that refused to come. Finally, Sophia spoke. Her voice was steady but strained, the voice of someone trying very hard to stay calm. She asked him why. Why did he choose alcohol over her? Why did he let addiction destroy their family? Why did he never come after them, never fight to get them back? Marcus listened to each question like a knife cutting into his heart. He did not try to defend himself or make excuses. He simply told her the truth. He told her that addiction had taken over his mind and made him believe that he was worthless, that they were better off without him. He told her that every day without them had been agony, that not a single moment had passed when he did not think about her and miss her. He told her that leaving them was not a choice, but a consequence of a disease he could not control. He also told her that none of that made it okay. Nothing could excuse the pain he had caused. He did not expect her to forgive him, or even to understand. He just wanted her to know that losing her was the greatest regret of his life, and that he would spend whatever years he had left trying to make it up to her, if she would let him. Sophia listened without interrupting. When he finished, she sat quietly for a long moment, processing everything she had heard. Then, slowly, she reached across the table and took her father's hand. She told him that she was not ready to forgive him. Maybe she would never be fully ready. But she was willing to try. She was willing to give him a chance to be part of her life again. It would not be easy, and it would not be quick. But if he was serious about changing, she would meet him halfway. Marcus could not speak. He simply held his daughter's hand and let the tears roll down his face. After 15 years of separation, they had taken the first step toward healing. It was small, but it was real, and it was more than he had dared to hope for. Over the following months, Marcus and Sophia built a relationship slowly and carefully. They talked on the phone every week. They exchanged text messages and emails. When Sophia had breaks from school, she flew down to Los Angeles to visit. Marcus showed her his apartment and played piano for her, just like he used to when she was small. The reconnection was not always smooth. There were difficult conversations and painful revelations. Sophia had questions that were hard to answer and feelings that were hard to process. Sometimes she pulled away, needing space to deal with her emotions. Sometimes, Marcus said the wrong thing and made everything worse, but they kept trying. They kept showing up. They kept believing that the relationship was worth saving, even when it felt impossible. Meanwhile, Marcus's career continued to grow. He performed at several mid-sized venues, each concert building on the success of the last. His playing was better than ever, deepened by the pain and wisdom of his experiences. Critics wrote glowing reviews, calling his comeback one of the greatest stories in the history of classical music. Then came the invitation that changed everything. The Los Angeles Philharmonic, one of the most respected orchestras in the world, wanted Marcus to perform at the Walt Disney Concert Hall. It would be a full evening concert, with Marcus as the featured soloist. The program would include pieces he had never performed publicly before, including compositions he had written during his years on the streets. It was an honor that most musicians could only dream of. But for Marcus, it was something even more meaningful. The Walt Disney Concert Hall was where he had performed his last major concert before his career collapsed. It was the place where everything had fallen apart. Now, he had the chance to return there and prove that his story was not over. He accepted the invitation with a mixture of excitement and terror. He had come so far since those dark days on the streets. He had rebuilt his life, reconnected with his family, and rediscovered his purpose. But performing at Disney Hall would test everything he had learned. It would show the world whether his comeback was real or just a beautiful dream that could not survive the bright lights of the biggest stage. The date was set for 6 months away. Marcus had half a year to prepare for the most important performance of his life. He threw himself into practice with renewed determination, spending every available hour at the piano, pushing his skills to new heights. He also continued to attend support group meetings and therapy sessions. He knew that staying sober was not something he could ever take for granted. Every day was a choice to stay on the path he had chosen. Every day was a small victory that added up to something larger. As the concert date approached, Marcus felt a strange calm settling over him. He was not the same man who had crashed and burned all those years ago. He was stronger now, wiser, more grateful for every breath and every note. Whatever happened at Disney Hall, he knew that he had already won the most important battle. He had found his way back to himself. The night of the concert arrived faster than Marcus expected. He stood backstage at the Walt Disney Concert Hall, wearing a new tuxedo that David had bought for him. Through the thick curtains, he could hear the murmur of the audience filling the seats. 2,300 people had come to see him play. The concert had sold out within hours of tickets going on sale. Marcus paced back and forth in the green room, trying to calm his racing heart. He had performed hundreds of concerts in his life, but none had felt like this. This was not just a performance. It was a reckoning, a chance to prove that redemption was possible, that broken things could be made whole again. Sarah came backstage to check on him. She looked elegant in a dark blue dress, her hair done up nicely for the special occasion. She had been there from the beginning, the journalist who had seen something special in a homeless man playing piano in a plaza. Without her, none of this would have been possible. She hugged Marcus and told him that she believed in him. No matter what happened on that stage, she said, he had already changed countless lives with his story. The concert was just the next chapter, not the final word. David came by next, giving Marcus a firm handshake and a pat on the shoulder. He reminded Marcus of how far he had traveled from those cold nights sleeping on the streets. He told him to enjoy the moment, to soak in every second of being exactly where he belonged. Then came the visitors Marcus had been waiting for most. Elena walked through the door first, looking beautiful in a silver dress. Behind her came Sophia, who had flown in from San Francisco that morning. She had never seen her father perform live, and she had insisted on being there for this historic night. Marcus felt his eyes fill with tears as he looked at his daughter. She was wearing a simple black dress and the pearl necklace that had belonged to his mother. Elena must have saved it all these years, keeping it safe until the right moment. Sophia crossed the room and wrapped her arms around her father. It was the first time she had hugged him since their reunion. The first time, in 15 years, that he had felt his daughter's embrace. He held her tightly, afraid to let go, afraid that the moment might slip away like a dream. She whispered in his ear that she was proud of him. 4 simple words that meant more to Marcus than any standing ovation or critical review. His daughter was proud of him. After everything he had put her through, after all the pain and disappointment, she was proud of the man he had become. A stage manager knocked on the door and announced that it was time. Marcus took a deep breath and wiped his eyes. He kissed Elena on the cheek and squeezed Sophia's hand one last time. Then he walked out of the green room and headed toward the stage. The walk from backstage to the piano felt longer than any journey Marcus had ever taken. His footsteps echoed on the wooden floor. The bright lights blinded him momentarily as he stepped onto the stage. The audience burst into applause, rising to their feet before he had even played a single note. Marcus stopped at the edge of the stage and looked out at the crowd. He could see Sarah and David in the front row, clapping enthusiastically. A few seats over, Elena and Sophia sat side by side, their faces glowing with love and anticipation. Scattered throughout the audience were people he recognized from his days on the streets. Homeless men and women who had been given free tickets, sitting among wealthy patrons and music critics as equals. He also saw faces he did not recognize. Thousands of strangers who had heard his story and wanted to be part of this moment. People who had struggled with their own demons and found hope in his journey. People who believed that second chances were possible, that the worst chapters of our lives did not have to be the final ones. Marcus walked to the piano and sat down on the bench. The applause gradually faded into silence. He placed his hands on the keys and felt the familiar smoothness beneath his fingertips. This was where he belonged. This was who he was meant to be. He began to play. The first piece was a Chopin ballade, one of the most difficult works in the piano repertoire. His fingers moved across the keys with precision and passion, drawing out melodies that seemed to hang in the air like golden threads. The music told a story of struggle and triumph, of darkness giving way to light. The audience sat in breathless silence, captivated by every note. Some people closed their eyes to absorb the music more fully. Others wiped away tears without embarrassment. The connection between Marcus and his listeners was palpable, a bridge built of sound and emotion that spanned the distance between the stage and every seat in the hall. He played for nearly 2 hours, moving through pieces by Beethoven, Liszt, and Rachmaninoff, before transitioning to his own compositions. The works he had written on the streets were raw and powerful, filled with the pain and longing of those dark years. But they also contained moments of unexpected beauty, glimpses of hope that had kept him alive even when he wanted to give up. The final piece was the lullaby he used to play for Sophia. He had arranged it into a full concert version, weaving in new melodies and harmonies that reflected everything that had happened since he first played it for his little girl. As the music filled the hall, Marcus looked over at his daughter and saw her crying. But these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of healing. The lullaby that had once represented loss and regret was now being transformed into something new. It was becoming a symbol of reunion, of love that had survived against all odds. When the final note faded into silence, the audience sat motionless for several heartbeats. Then, as if moved by a single impulse, they rose to their feet and began to applaud. The ovation was thunderous, filling every corner of the concert hall and spilling out into the night. Marcus stood and bowed, overwhelmed by the response. He motioned for Sophia to join him on stage. She hesitated at first, but Elena encouraged her with a gentle push. Sophia made her way to the stage, climbing the steps and crossing to stand beside her father. Marcus took her hand and raised it along with his own, sharing the moment with the daughter he had lost and found again. The applause grew even louder, if that was possible. People cheered and whistled and stamped their feet. It was not just applause for the music. It was applause for the story, for the journey, for the miracle of redemption. After the concert, there was a reception in the lobby of the concert hall. Important people from the music world came to congratulate Marcus and discuss future opportunities. Recording deals were offered. International tours were proposed. The same industry that had abandoned him 15 years ago was now eager to embrace him again. But Marcus was not interested in talking business that night. He stood in a quiet corner with Elena and Sophia, the three of them forming a small island of peace amid the chaos of the reception. They talked about the future. Not the concerts or the fame, but the simple things. Family dinners, holiday visits, the possibility of truly being a family again. Elena told Marcus that she had never remarried. She had dated occasionally over the years, but no one had ever compared to him. Despite everything, despite the pain and the years of separation, he was still the love of her life. Marcus took her hand and told her that he had never stopped loving her either. He asked if they might have a second chance, not just as parents, but as partners. He did not expect an immediate answer. He knew that trust had to be rebuilt slowly. But he wanted her to know that his heart had never moved on. Elena smiled through her tears and said that she was willing to try. They had lost so many years to his addiction. Maybe it was time to see what they could build in the years they had left. Sophia watched her parents with a mixture of joy and disbelief. The family she had thought was destroyed forever was somehow coming back together. It would not be perfect, she knew. There would be challenges and setbacks. But for the first time since she was 8 years old, she allowed herself to believe that everything might be okay. Later that night, after the reception had ended and the crowds had gone home, Marcus walked back through the empty streets of Los Angeles. He passed the plaza where he had first played the public piano, the place where his comeback had begun. He stopped for a moment and looked at the bench where Sarah had first approached him with her questions and her kindness. He thought about how far he had come since that day. From sleeping on the ground and begging for change, to performing at one of the finest concert halls in the world, from being mocked and ignored to being celebrated and loved, from losing everything to gaining more than he had ever imagined. He looked up at the stars, the same stars that had witnessed his lowest moments and his highest triumphs. He whispered a thank you to his mother, wherever she was. He promised her that he would never waste his gift again. He promised her that he would spend the rest of his life making music that brought joy to the world. Marcus walked home with a full heart, knowing that his story was not over. There were still concerts to play, and lives to touch, and relationships to nurture. There were still battles to fight against the demons that never completely went away. But he was ready for all of it. He had been broken, but he had refused to stay broken. He had fallen as far as a person could fall, but he had found the strength to get back up. His story was proof that it was never too late to change, never too late to reach for the light, never too late to become the person you were always meant to be. And that was the greatest music of all.